It's always easy for us to judge ourselves in a good way and rationalize the things we do.
It's just where your brain goes. Your brain is trying to help you tell the easiest story.
Well, everyone else does it.
I know I shouldn't do this, but it's for the greater good.
These things happen.
Oh, everyone does it. It's not a big deal.
But if you're aware that that's where your brain's going to take you, if you're aware that it's so easy to say, well, this is why I chose to do something, then you can be willing to take the time to say, okay, I know that's what's the fastest route, but if I'm going to reflect on this, how can I not rationalize? How can I not choose to do that bad behavior?
Hey everyone, I am the Spuddler, and welcome to my channel. This video is going to be about how we can argue a bit better and what not to do. Don't worry, that is still in the making. But as I was researching this topic, I came across a phrase that I want to explain, and as it is quite a complex concept, I think it deserves a video all of its own. So I'm going to run the intro, and then I will tell you all about cognitive dissonance and how it affects our own judgment regarding the issues we cover in our community. As I was reading up on the best ways to argue, I came across a phrase that I hadn't heard before. That phrase was cognitive dissonance. I started to research this term, and the more I understood about it, the more I realized how it affects the way we see the arguments that are currently rife in our community. It provides at least one explanation for why misinformation and downright lies often get told, and why seemingly like-minded people often find themselves on opposite sides of an issue. So, I am going to spend some time explaining this phrase to you, and I am hoping that we will all come away understanding others, but more importantly ourselves, a little better. And as usual, this video is made with a voice changer. Now, I am not an expert in this field, and I am going to use clips from various channels to help me explain things, as these guys are the experts. And although this concept is quite complex, I found a few creators that explain things quite well. So first off, let's listen to a clip that I took from a channel called Jason Bentley Jones and a video entitled A Lesson in Cognitive Dissonance.
According to psychologist Leon Festinger, whenever we choose to do something that conflicts with our prior beliefs, feelings, or values, a state of cognitive dissonance is created in us. A tension between what we think and what we do.
But surely we all stay true to our personal beliefs and boundaries, don't we? Because I am beginning to suspect that we all suffer from this, especially when dealing with the drama in our community. So, let's find out more. And I think Sprouts had the best explanation of exactly what cognitive dissonance really is. And I have included a link to this channel in the description as usual.
If you read a text or hear something new, your mind has a strong desire for order and consistency. Now, the moment your brain holds two contradicting ideas, you experience distress. Your mind often resolves this problem by tweaking the ideas until they become consistent with the other stories you tell yourself to be true. Meat eaters, for example, who are confronted with new information of how their dinner came about, can either eat less meat, deploy strategies to cope with the new information, such as denial, or do a little bit of both. If two conflicting ideas are deeply ingrained in our identity, the mental imbalance can become overwhelming and intoxicate our thoughts, and as a result, we may believe even the most absurd conspiracy theories. To keep our sanity, it helps to learn about this phenomenon, known as cognitive dissonance.
Okay, so that makes sense. And yes, I am aware that I do at times make excuses for someone else's bad behaviour as well as my own. I have gone off in search of justification for what happened, or persuade myself that although wrong, it was justified and therefore okay. Kinda. Yes, I personally can admit to that. And when I take a moment to think about this, I suspect that at least some of the calls of hypocrite, and what about what your friend did? Why is that different? Well, maybe some of this can be put down to this well-understood human psychological trait. So yes, as I have suspected all along, we are all to a greater or lesser degree hypocrites. Or putting it in a kinder way, we are all full of inconsistencies in our behaviour and opinions, and this is due, at least in part, to the way we each individually handle cognitive dissonance. And if we are really good at dealing with this dissonance, we can actually convince ourselves that things that are actually illogical, unlikely, or plainly a load of nonsense are actually facts. But that is just my uneducated impression so far. The next clip is from a chap called Andy Lottrell. I wanted to include him because his channel is good and I think he is such a jolly chap that he deserves a mention. Oh, and he has a video that does a deep dive into this subject if you want to learn more. Anyway, over to Andy.
Let's start out by talking about what cognitive dissonance is. How would we define it? At the very basics, cognitive dissonance is about inconsistency. When we hold two thoughts that are inconsistent with one another, basically, that's dissonance. But why do people feel like they need to resolve anything at all? What's the big deal about dissonance? Well, some people say that dissonance just gets in the way of finding some sense of truth. In general, if we want to understand the world, then we want a clear, consistent picture of it. And anything that makes us feel inconsistency is something that's a problem, and we're motivated to restore consistency again. But most of the research in dissonance has looked at something a little bit different, and that idea is that it's physically uncomfortable to experience cognitive dissonance. There's actually some negative physical tension that you feel anytime you recognize two inconsistent thoughts or realize that you've done something through your behavior that contradicts your true attitudes and beliefs.
Okay, so what I get from that is when we do something that is not within our usual set defined values and behaviour, we actually physically feel discomfort. Maybe it shows in us as agitation or maybe anger. I don't know, but now that I think about it, when I have said or done something that isn't quite aligned with my own values, I personally feel anxious, and the need to resolve this conflict for me is important. So, how do we deal with cognitive dissonance? What do we do to alleviate the feelings of discomfort? Well, there seems to be 4 things that we all do, and as usual, the specific recipe from these 4 things that each of us creates is unique to ourselves. So I'm going to run through these 4 approaches to dealing with cognitive dissonance. As an example, one that I think we all can relate to, I am going to create an imaginary creator. Let's call her Blue. Blue has a personality that I love, and I am in all her chats, and know a lot of the people there. It is in fact the highlight of my day. I believe that Blue and I have similar values and opinions, and she makes me laugh a lot, which is something I always look forward to. One day, however, Blue gets very angry with another creator and doxes her on a live. Well, normally this is something I will not condone, and this makes me feel anxiety because I now have 2 conflicting ideas in my head. One that Blue is a creator that always sticks to the rules, and this new Blue who has just broken the rules. So what do I do? I could, and probably should, call the creator out, get cross in her chat and express my feelings. I could stop watching Blue and stay totally aligned with my personal values. So if I changed my behaviour, I could feel a sense of peace again. But of course that would mean I would lose all my friends, and I love the channel so much that personally I don't really want to do that. So I try to relieve the discomfort that this cognitive dissonance or inconsistency can be managed. A way that means I can still watch Blue and hang out with my friends and stay aligned to my core values. One way is simply to trivialise the whole thing, or even ignore it and pretend it never happened. And of course, because I won't acknowledge what happened, eventually I may even go as far as to convince myself that it never did actually happen. But if I compromise just a little bit, yes, Blue was wrong to dox, but does it really matter that much? After all, she has never done that before, and everyone makes mistakes. Right? So I have been able to find a solution simply by changing my own values, well, just a little bit. Another way that I could deal with the discomfort of cognitive dissonance is to change my thoughts on this matter. I could now consider doxing acceptable, with rationalizations such as, well, everyone else is doing it. I may even go as far as to change my viewpoint entirely. Maybe I tell myself that, well, maybe it isn't really that important anymore. And although this would require my values to totally change, I could choose to do this if the driving force, influence and peer pressure is strong enough. So this is when I begin to create a narrative that allows a way for me to convince myself that what happened and my values are still aligned, even though in reality I may begin to change my core values, but I may not even be aware that I did it. So now I want to quickly show you a clip from a channel called McComb's School of Business and a video entitled Cognitive Dissonance, a Concept Unwrapped, where this is explained a little better.
Professor David Luban has noted, in situation after situation, literally hundreds of experiments reveal that when our conduct clashes with our prior beliefs swing into conformity with our conduct without our noticing this is going on.
So we can all change our core values and beliefs just by trying to rationalize and excuse something that we know to be wrong. Maybe this is what is happening to all those people that began on YouTube with good intentions, but are now just another one of the bad actors. Whatever the case, I think we all may be guilty of this. Just for some, the change is more pronounced than in others. Another way of dealing with the tension caused by cognitive dissonance is to create a narrative and change our values to accommodate for this inconsistency. So if we return to Blue and her doxing, I could try to find reasons why this bad behaviour by Blue is acceptable, or at the very least, forgivable. I could look at all the things the other creator has done in the past and justify it that way, or I could negate the conflict by simply stating that Blue didn't dox her first. I may even go as far and create overblown scenarios and false memories of past events to help bolster my new point of view. And of course, this would resolve my discomfort. But in reality, this will not only change me, and not for the better, but I will likely be called a hypocrite, part of the problem, a liar, and a simp. So it appears to me that as part of the changes to our core values, we need to rationalize it in some way. And I think that this is when the excuses and exceptions to the rule, the whataboutisms, the they did it first so it is okay excuses, and the plain old made-up narratives and over-exaggerations that we create just to find the balance and harmony our mind demands. We need to bear in mind that the content we all too often consume has been created, and in its creation that creators' own methods for dealing with cognitive dissonance come into play, so it is always good to return to the facts of a case or an issue from time to time, just in case facts and rationalizations over time have become mixed up. Hopefully you are all still with me and are beginning to understand what happens psychologically when we feel cognitive dissonance. But just as an example of this in action, I am going to briefly run through the first experiment that was carried out that identified and measured the effects of cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger conducted an experiment in the 1950s where he got students to perform a very boring, meaningless, and repetitive task. After they had come to the end of the allotted time, they were asked whether they would mind promoting the experiment to others by telling them how exciting and rewarding the experiment really was. They are told that this is also part of the experiment. Half of the group were offered $1 for doing this, the other half were offered $20. The students that were given $1 felt far more discomfort than those that were given $20. For the $1 crew, they began to convince themselves that the experiment had in fact been fun, some to the extent that they actually wanted to do further experiments. Those who were given $20 felt far less or no dissonance at all, as they felt justified in lying because of the $20 payment. And because the discomfort of cognitive dissonance was resolved by it being just a job, and a well-paid one at that, they didn't need to convince themselves that what they were telling other students was true. And when this group was asked if they would be willing to do further similar experiments, they answered with a firm no. Interestingly, if you were to consider all this from the other side, from the perspective of someone being sold the lie, if they knew that there was money involved, well, they would probably distrust the words from the student getting $20 more than the student getting $1 in payment. And personally, I found that particular difference really interesting. So what can we do to combat the discomfort of dissonance in a positive way? Well, I am going to return to the Combs School of Business video for some answers to this one.
There are no easy answers to cognitive dissonance's potential for adverse effects upon our moral decision-making and actions. But here are 3 quick suggestions to help minimize or combat cognitive or moral dissonance. First, never ignore that guilty feeling you sometimes get. Stop and honestly analyze why you are feeling it. Second, study the many means our minds use to distance us from our immoral actions and guard against them. Third and last, get to know the most common rationalizations that people use to excuse themselves from living up to their own ethical standards. And let those rationalizations be a warning to you whenever you hear yourself using them.
Well, I think we all know what those rationalizations sound like, so I won't comment further. But at least now we can understand a little about what causes them to be said or typed, and we can also begin to see why and how misinformation and over-exaggerated rhetoric may actually begin. I don't know, I am not an expert, but we at least now understand one of the contributing factors that leads to all this infighting and alternative facts. There is one final thing that I want to mention, as I think this is very relevant to our community. A person in chat showing their name and their image on screen will feel the discomfort of cognitive dissonance far more than the person sitting behind an alt account and an emoji. In fact, some trolls may not really feel any discomfort at all, and I think this explains a lot. Well, I'm not sure about you, but all of that has made my head spin a little. I need to spend some time reflecting on what I have just learned and be honest with myself about how inconsistent I may actually be. It also makes me understand a little better why there are so many inconsistencies of outrage when yet another creator or sub is doxed, for example. Yes, of course, none of us can watch everything, nor are there enough hours in the day to call out every bad thing that happens in our community. But maybe some of those cries of hypocrite are correct. Maybe we all from time to time make exceptions to our rules, create justifications for our actions, or maybe the actions of a creator we like, or a community that we want to stay part of. But remember, cognitive dissonance is a part of all of us, and we all resolve the discomfort that this type of inconsistency creates in a number of different ways. By having a little understanding of the internal conflict that having to support a position, action or statement made by, say, a creator you love can cause, the psychological and physical discomfort you are feeling. Well, at least now we all know what is going on, why, and the ways we can resolve this discomfort. I often hear people say that all this conflict in our community is exhausting. Well, now I am thinking that maybe a little of that is as a result of all the cognitive dissonance we have to contend with daily. Just a thought. I also suspect that some of the misinformation and general wild accusations that we have heard, both about others in our community, but far more importantly, the families and loved ones of the missing, well, I think that I am beginning to see where, how, and why that information is created. Well, at least one of the reasons. So, now that we know that we are all at times guilty of creating a narrative to resolve cognitive dissonance, and by understanding this topic a little better, I hope that we can all make better decisions when these internal conflicts arise, and ensure that we stay true to our core values, no matter how easy it is just to tweak them a little instead. But before we do any of that, we need to be honest with ourselves. And after this, I am definitely going to take some time to consider how far away from the person I want to be has the resolution of cognitive dissonance taken me. Am I really as good a person as I think that I am? Well, now that I have learned about this, I am no longer sure. So now that we know the basics and we understand this shared psychological trait, maybe we can all recognize this in ourselves and take some time to reflect on these internal conflicts with at least an understanding of why our mind needs to feel harmony and what the good and bad ways are that are used to achieve this. Maybe we can guide these thought processes in the right direction and actually begin to live more within those ideals and the image we all have of ourselves. But it seems very clear to me that none of this can happen without honesty, not to our friends, but to ourselves. Because how can we really be honest with others when we are not honest with ourselves? Anyway, thank you for watching, and please leave a comment and hit the happy thumb if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time, where I will be running through why we argue and the techniques and approaches that will help you to be better at it. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.